Chapter 1. A small island with grand ambitions. If one were to examine Britain on a modern map, it would appear as nothing more than a modest island nation on the edge of Europe. Yet, this small landmass once commanded the largest empire in human history. At its height, the British Empire ruled territories on every inhabited continent, governing nearly a quarter of the world's land and population. This extraordinary transformation did not occur overnight. It was the result of centuries of ambition, warfare, trade, and innovation. Long before Britain became a unified state, the Kingdom of England emerged as the dominant power in the British Isles. With a growing population, expanding economy, and a capable military, England gradually absorbed Wales and extended its influence into Ireland. Scotland, however, remained fiercely independent, resisting English dominance for centuries. These internal power struggles shaped the political foundation upon which Britain would later build an empire. Chapter 2. Exploration, Trade, and the First Colonial Experiments. The late 16th century marked England's first serious attempts at overseas expansion. Under Queen Elizabeth I, English explorers were sent across the oceans to seek new trade routes and claim lands not yet controlled by rival European powers. Figures such as Sir Francis Drake circumnavigated the globe, demonstrating England's growing naval capability. At the same time, the Crown granted charters to powerful trading companies. The East India Company and the Levant Company were given exclusive rights to trade in vast regions, laying the groundwork for economic imperialism. While early colonial ventures like the Roanoke settlement failed, they provided valuable lessons for future expansion. Chapter 3. Union at Home. Expansion abroad. The accession of James VI of Scotland to the English throne in 1603 united the crowns of England and Scotland, though both kingdoms remained politically separate. During this era, organized colonization became more systematic. Colonies were established under different systems: crown colonies, charter colonies, and proprietary colonies, each designed to extend English influence while generating profit. One critical but often overlooked development was the plantation of Ulster in Ireland. English and Scottish settlers were strategically placed on confiscated land, creating a model of colonization that would later be replicated across the globe. Chapter 4. The Atlantic Empire and the Age of Slavery. Throughout the 17th century, England expanded aggressively into North America and the Caribbean. Colonies such as Virginia, Barbados, and Jamaica became essential to the imperial economy. Sugar, tobacco, and cotton generated immense wealth, but at a devastating human cost. The transatlantic slave trade became central to Britain's economic rise. British ships transported millions of enslaved Africans to the Americas, fueling plantation economies. By the late 1600s, Britain had become the world's leading slave trading nation, integrating human exploitation into its imperial system. Chapter 5. Britain becomes a global power. The early 18th century brought a major political transformation with the Acts of Union in 1707, formally creating Great Britain. This unification strengthened Britain's economic and military potential. Soon after, Britain emerged victorious in a series of European wars, gaining key territories such as Gibraltar and Newfoundland. Meanwhile, the East India Company expanded its influence in India. Through warfare, alliances, and economic pressure, it transitioned from a trading corporation into a governing power. Victories like the Battle of Plassey marked the beginning of British dominance in South Asia. Chapter 6. Empire on which the sun never set. By the mid-18th century, Britain stood unrivaled. Naval supremacy allowed it to control global trade routes, while victory in the 7 Years' War eliminated France as a colonial rival. Canada, vast Caribbean islands, and strategic ports across the world fell under British control. However, imperial success brought new challenges. Heavy taxation and political exclusion in the American colonies led to rebellion. The American Revolution resulted in Britain's first major imperial loss, forcing a re-evaluation of colonial strategy. Chapter 7. Turning East. Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. After losing America, Britain redirected its ambitions toward Asia and the Pacific. Australia became a penal colony, while explorers charted the Pacific and North America's western coast. In India, British control expanded rapidly, turning the subcontinent into the empire's most valuable possession. During the 19th century, Britain also expanded aggressively in Africa. Strategic interests, trade routes, and competition with other European powers drove territorial acquisitions during the scramble for Africa. Chapter 8: War, Industry, and Imperial Confidence. The Napoleonic Wars tested Britain's strength, but decisive victories, especially at sea, secured its global dominance. The Industrial Revolution further amplified British power, making it the world's leading manufacturer and financial center. Moral opposition to slavery grew, and Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807, followed by slavery itself in 1834. Though this marked progress, the empire continued to extract wealth from its colonies through other means. Chapter 9: The Imperial Century and Rising Tensions. The period from 1815 to 1914 is often called Britain's Imperial Century. India was ruled directly by the Crown after the 1857 rebellion, while Britain expanded its influence across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Yet challenges emerged. Rival powers like Germany and Russia threatened Britain's supremacy. Nationalist movements began forming within colonies, demanding greater autonomy and self-rule. Chapter 10: World Wars and the Beginning of the End. The First World War strained Britain's resources despite victory. Colonies provided soldiers, materials, and support, but the cost was immense. After the war, independence movements intensified, starting with Ireland. The Second World War delivered the final blow. Though Britain emerged victorious, it was economically exhausted. Maintaining a global empire was no longer possible. Chapter 11: Decolonization and the Modern Legacy. From the late 1940s onward, Britain gradually granted independence to its colonies. India's independence in 1947 marked a turning point, followed by Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia. By the late 20th century, the empire had largely dissolved. Many former colonies joined the Commonwealth, maintaining diplomatic and cultural ties. The transfer of Hong Kong in 1997 symbolized the formal end of British imperial rule. Chapter 12: India, the jewel in the crown. By the mid-19th century, the Indian subcontinent had become the most valuable and strategically important possession of the British Empire. What began as commercial influence under the East India Company had evolved into full political control. India provided Britain with raw materials, vast markets for manufactured goods, and immense revenue that sustained imperial power. However, British rule in India was not without resistance. Cultural insensitivity, economic exploitation, and military reforms created deep resentment among Indian soldiers and civilians alike. In 1857, this tension exploded into a widespread uprising known as the Indian Rebellion, or Sepoy Mutiny. Though the rebellion was ultimately suppressed, it marked a turning point. The British government dissolved the East India Company and assumed direct control of India in 1858, ruling it as a crown colony under the British Raj. Chapter 13: Expansion and Control in Asia. Following the consolidation of India, Britain strengthened its influence across Asia. Strategic ports and trading hubs were established to protect imperial trade routes. Singapore emerged as a critical naval and commercial base, while Hong Kong became Britain's gateway to China after the Opium Wars. These conflicts, fought to protect British commercial interests, forced China to open its ports to foreign trade. Though highly profitable for Britain, the Opium Wars left a lasting legacy of resentment and instability in the region. Across Asia, British influence expanded through a combination of diplomacy, military force, and economic dominance. Chapter 14: Africa and the Scramble for Power. During the late 19th century, European powers raced to claim territory in Africa, a period known as the Scramble for Africa. Britain emerged as one of the most aggressive participants, motivated by access to resources, strategic advantage, and imperial prestige. British forces occupied large portions of eastern, southern, and western Africa. Egypt was occupied to secure the Suez Canal, the empire's most vital trade artery to India. In southern Africa, tensions between British settlers and Dutch-descended Boers led to violent conflict. The Second Anglo-Boer War ended in British victory in 1902, but it revealed the growing cost and complexity of maintaining imperial rule. Chapter 15: Technology, Trade, and Imperial Administration. At the height of its power, The British Empire was held together not only by military force, but also by technology. Steamships, railways, telegraphs, and modern bureaucracies allowed Britain to govern territories thousands of miles away. The All-Red Line telegraph network enabled instant communication across the empire, strengthening administrative control. British financial institutions dominated global trade, while London became the world's economic center. Yet beneath this appearance of stability, nationalist movements were quietly forming. Chapter 16. World War I, an imperial strain. The outbreak of the First World War in 1914 placed enormous strain on the British Empire. Britain relied heavily on its colonies for manpower, food, and raw materials. Soldiers from India, Africa, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand fought and died on distant battlefields. Though Britain emerged victorious in 1918, the cost was devastating. The war weakened the British economy and shattered the myth of imperial invincibility. Promises of political reform made to colonies during the war fueled demands for independence in its aftermath. Chapter 17. Nationalism and the cracks in empire. The interwar years saw growing unrest across the empire. In Ireland, decades of resistance culminated in independence for most of the island in 1921. In India, leaders like Mahatma Gandhi mobilized millions through non-violent resistance, challenging British authority on an unprecedented scale. Elsewhere, colonial populations demanded greater rights and self-rule. Britain attempted to maintain control through gradual reforms, but the tide of history was turning. The empire had reached its territorial peak, but its foundations were weakening. Chapter 18. World War II. The final turning point. The Second World War proved to be the decisive blow to British imperial dominance. Once again, Britain depended on its empire for survival. Colonial troops fought across Europe, Africa, and Asia, while resources flowed into the war effort. Victory in 1945 came at a staggering cost. Britain was financially exhausted, heavily indebted, and no longer capable of sustaining a global empire. At the same time, colonial populations who had fought for freedom abroad demanded it at home. Chapter 19. The wave of decolonization. In the years following the war, Britain began the process of dismantling its empire. India and Pakistan gained independence in 1947, triggering the rapid decolonization of Asia and Africa. Over the next 3 decades, dozens of former colonies became sovereign nations. Rather than resisting this transformation entirely, Britain sought to manage it through peaceful transfers of power. Many newly independent states chose to remain connected through the Commonwealth, preserving diplomatic and cultural ties. Chapter 20. The end of empire and its legacy. By the late 20th century, the British Empire had largely faded into history. The handover of Hong Kong to China in 1997 symbolized the final chapter of imperial rule. Only a small number of overseas territories remained under British administration. Yet the empire's legacy remains deeply embedded in the modern world. English became a global language, British legal and political systems influenced countless nations, and migration reshaped British society itself. Chapter 21. The post-war world and a changing order. After the devastation of the Second World War, the global balance of power shifted dramatically. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, while Britain found itself economically weakened and politically constrained. The imperial system that had once sustained British global dominance was no longer viable in a world moving towards self-determination and international cooperation. Britain faced immense pressure both from within and outside its colonies. The moral authority of empire had been deeply undermined, and colonial leaders now spoke the language of freedom, democracy, and national identity. Principles Britain itself had long claimed to champion. Chapter 22. India's independence and the domino effect. The independence of India in 1947 represented the most significant and symbolic loss for the British Empire. India had been its largest colony, its greatest source of revenue, and its central strategic asset. The partition of the subcontinent into India and Pakistan was accompanied by violence and mass displacement, leaving a lasting legacy of trauma. India's independence sent a powerful message across the empire. If Britain could no longer hold India, then no colony was beyond the reach of freedom. Across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean, nationalist movements intensified, accelerating the collapse of imperial rule. Chapter 23. The Wind of Change in Africa. During the 1950s and 1960s, Africa became the focal point of British decolonization. Political pressure, economic realities, and rising resistance made continued colonial rule increasingly untenable. British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan famously acknowledged this transformation in his Wind of Change speech, recognizing that nationalism was reshaping the continent. Countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and Uganda gained independence, often after long struggles. While some transitions were peaceful, others were marked by conflict and instability, as colonial borders and institutions proved difficult to adapt to new realities. Chapter 24. The Commonwealth, a new kind of empire. As direct rule ended, Britain sought to preserve influence through a new framework, the Commonwealth of Nations. Former colonies were invited to join as equal members, maintaining diplomatic, economic, and cultural connections. Though lacking political authority, the Commonwealth provided continuity in a rapidly changing world. Shared language, legal systems, and educational structures created enduring ties, even as former colonies pursued independent paths. Chapter 25. Britain redefined at home. The end of empire also transformed Britain itself. Millions of people from former colonies migrated to the United Kingdom, reshaping its demographics, culture, and identity. Cities like London, Birmingham, and Manchester became global hubs of diversity. This migration enriched British society, but also challenged it. Debates over identity, race, and belonging became central to modern British politics, reflecting the unresolved legacies of imperial history. Chapter 26. Economic and Cultural Aftershocks. Imperial decline forced Britain to reinvent its economy. Once dependent on colonial markets and resources, it turned toward Europe and the global financial system. London remained a major financial center, even as industrial power waned. Culturally, the empire left a profound imprint. British sports, education systems, legal traditions, and governance models spread worldwide. At the same time, Britain absorbed global influences in return, creating a uniquely interconnected national culture. Chapter 27. The remaining overseas territories. Though the empire largely dissolved, Britain retained a small number of overseas territories. Places like Gibraltar, the Falkland Islands, and Bermuda remain under British sovereignty, often by choice of their local populations. These territories serve as reminders of Britain's imperial past, occasionally sparking diplomatic tensions, but also highlighting the complex nature of decolonization, where identity and self-determination take many forms. Chapter 28. Reassessing empire in the modern age. In recent decades, historians and societies alike have re-evaluated the British Empire. Monuments, museums, and school curricula have become arenas of debate over how imperial history should be remembered. Some view the empire as a force for modernization and global connection, while others emphasize its role in exploitation, violence, and inequality. These debates reflect a broader struggle to reconcile national pride with historical responsibility. Chapter 29. Britain in a post-imperial world. In the 21st century, Britain is no longer an imperial power, but its global influence endures through diplomacy, finance, culture, and language. Former colonies now stand as independent nations, many surpassing Britain economically and politically. The imperial era shaped global borders, economies, and relationships in ways that continue to influence international affairs today. Understanding this history remains essential to understanding the modern world. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and comment.